The three primary drivers of any reselling business are who you know, what you have, and what you are doing. In my most recent video, I talked about how networking can be a huge asset to your business's growth and adaptability across different types of market cycles. And today we're going to focus on the second driving engine, what you have. So the items that you possess intended for resale are known as your inventory. Pretty basic stuff there, right? So with that said, the inventory that you have kind of shapes this third step, which I'll talk about in my next upload, which is what you do. Now, there are three different primary components within the Pokemon space that you might be interested in selling or collecting, and those are raw ungraded cards, graded slabs, or sealed product, as far as I can tell. And if you think of anything different that's highly collectible, let me know in the comments down below. But those are the three things that I'm going to be focusing on today. So the items that you have, not only do they vary in their sell-through rate and also like potential value or perceived value, but also there's different channels and avenues that are best suited for every individual item within this hobby. Now, some people just don't care too much and they just kind of send things wherever is convenient for them. I know some people who are growing businesses completely 100% based on consignment, so they don't actually they don't make listings on TCG Player or eBay. They just have like a person that they channel each of these different types of items to. And I do think that that is probably the optimal way of going about it if doing B2B, business-to-business transactions is your goal. There are now officially in Pokemon outlets for that to happen. And historically, this is significant because that hasn't always been the case. As a matter of fact, for the majority of the time that the Pokemon market or hobby has been lucrative, the primary way to get ahead is to have a huge account on a platform like eBay. With that said, sellers who have an immense amount of volume channeling through their eBay store have access to greater visibility, more impressions, therefore more traffic channeled to their individual listings. With that also could come an adjusted fee rate. So the average person is paying something along the lines of 15-ish%, right? The actual number, I've actually done a deep dive on like paying percentages or the frictional fees from eBay. So refer to that for more specifics. I don't have that all written down on hand right now. But with that said, it's going to vary based on your seller store level. But also, if you do enough volume, you might actually get a promotion from eBay, which means that you're going to be able to sell your items for a lower fee, which is, well, beneficial. With that said, today, these types of people have grown businesses themselves that allow you to sell through their established channels for a lower fee than what you would on your own operating an eBay store. And I'm going to preface this video by saying that I have a lot of action to take in regards to optimizing the topic I'm talking about today. And I do think that this is one of the areas of my personal business that could stand to, have the most improvement. And it's interesting because I have the network to make something like that operable. However, I just have a hard time pulling the trigger, and I'll kind of talk about why. So that kind of brings us to our first topic of ungraded cards, also known as raw cards. These are just like random cards you have laying around that are not encased or sonically welded into a slab, and the condition is heavily variable and heavily subjective. So with this type of item, this is generally a thing that gets sold on platforms like eBay or TCG Player are the two primary ones. When you get a raw card, the thing that you need to first consider is this gradable? That is, if you're interested in grading the cards yourselves, which most people, I presume, are. So you have to take a look at the condition of the card, the corners, edges, surface, and centering, and you need to make a judgment on whether or not you think that that card is worth grading. And you can go to eBay sold listings and comp out the price of the card in the grade that you believe it might get. And if you don't have a great concept of how grading works, I run a pre-grading service called geminspectorllc, linked in the description below. And I actually pre-grade cards for businesses and collectors and just people trying to get their bearings in general. I offer grading notes so that you can actually learn how to optimize PSA and CGC scales respectively, and thereby growing your business, because we're going to talk about slab optimization too. So with that said, if a card is gradable, you need to figure out which company it's best suited for. For example, a lot of vintage collectors prefer PSA historically, but if a card has a chance at like a pristine 10, then sometimes you can actually realize a slight premium relative to a regular PSA 10. So those are also some types of things to know about ungraded cards. From there also, you just want to make sure that if you get around to listing that on your eBay store, you're taking like photos that are well lit with a black background, and then also making sure that your title structure is going to actually drive traffic to your store. There's lots of information about that available online. Maybe I'll do some more videos on that in the future, because learning that has been a massive benefactor to my business as well. With that said too, if you have if you know somebody, again, going back to like the whole idea of networking, if you know somebody that particularly deals in a specific type of card, perhaps they're running like a stream, a rip and ship stream, or just a live auction stream, and you know that they're going to be able to intake cards in mass volume that you have a large volume of, or a large quantity of, then perhaps you just need to set up some kind of deal. And that can be an effective way to offload cards too, if you don't want to spend the time making individual listings. With that said, let's move on to graded cards. So these are also known as slabs. The companies that I have the most exposure to are PSA and CGC. However, there's a lot of other reputable companies like Tag and Beckett that people might prefer to send their cards to as well. And so that's a thing to know too. If you're dealing in graded cards, you must know the platform. First of all, like if you're going to grade the card, you need to know which company it's going to be best suited for. And usually best suited means has the most consumer demand. But then also you have to consider the platform that it's going to perform best on, or the selling conditions that it might perform the best on. Example given. If you have an extremely niche card that not very many people know about, however, you know it's rare, so you have knowledge asymmetry on this particular item, then probably don't auction that, right? Like that's an item that you put on buy it now on your eBay store or whatever you decide to do, and you either like field offers or you just stick to a rigid price. Those are a couple of strategies, but if it's a card that customers need an education on, usually an auction is not the optimal selling method in order to realize the most potential gain or most profitable outcome for that. Whereas something like a Moonbryon or the Destined Rivals Rockets Mewtwo SAR, or SIR, I guess in English, those are types of cards that are highly in demand, and the pricing between auction and buy it now is not intensely different. That said, there are some ways that you can optimize. Like cards like those mentioned are kind of flirting with like the $2,000+ range. And so items like that, you could auction via places like Z&G Emporium and realize a 95% payout. Again, that can be about a 10% difference between what you would take home selling it yourself versus what you can do with them. So that's nice. A trap that historically people have fallen into with slabs is like, well, I'm going to have to pay all these fees on my eBay store, so I might wait until it goes up a little bit, right? We've all heard that phrase, goes up, right? Pokemon always goes up is what people might be parroting online or whatever. And, from the day-to-day basis, that's not always true, but I guess we do have some historical data suggesting that, demand goes up, prices go up, right? So take that for what it's worth. But a trap that people have fallen into with that presumption is that they might just hold on to a card for a while to wait for it to go up, so that after frictional fees, it's more worth their time. Well, you can kind of circumvent that nowadays in a massive way by utilizing consignment services to achieve a higher net payout on highly demandable items, or items that are highly in demand. I'm not sure if demandable is actually the term to use there. But with that said, like those are the types of things to think about. Another consideration is there are other platforms aside from eBay where you might realize, tremendous gains. Like Fanatics Collects is one that I utilize often. And Fanatics Collect has some great opportunities with like CGC. They have a partnership where they actually have CGC graders in-house that will grade your cards for, I think the publicly advertised rate is $10 a card. And again, shout out to geminspectorllc. I can actually grade your cards, CGC grading plus Fanatics auction. So you're not getting those cards back. They're just instantly selling. But I am able to offer that to customers for $9.50 a card through geminspector. So that might be worth something. That might be something worth exploring as well. But I send, probably something like 100 to 200 cards a month to Fanatics right now. And I'm looking to increase that. And again, that's just to be graded by CGC and immediately auctioned. There is a little bit of a learning curve there because some cards historically perform better than others on that type of platform and that type of like condition. So again, it kind of comes down to your market research and making sure that you've done your due diligence. And at the end of the day, hopeful news, it's just math, right? So you can do the simple calculation to see if your card minus $10 is auctioning on that platform based on the sold listing prices that are published there to see if it's going to be worth sending or not. And again, obviously, cost of goods is a factor to consider there, but that kind of is a technical detail that extends beyond the purpose of this video exclusively. And then again, sealed product. So again, sealed product is an item that you could either sell on TCG Player, eBay, or via consignment. But having the proper way to assess that particular item and see where historically it's sold well for, what conditions it's actually sold well for. These are things that you need to be knowing and researching actively before you just YOLO an item out. For example, I recently listed a Groundbreaker theme deck on my eBay store, which is from, what is that? EX Hidden Legends, I believe. And it's factory sealed and it has like this cool Golem Cosmos Hollow or whatever. And I was looking at that, and auctions have ended for like below $150, where buy it nows are closer to $200. So that's like a $50 spread between those two. And again, when you're looking at an item that is about $200, that's like a quarter of the value, right? So you're seeing a 25% differential there between auction and buy it now. So an item like that, in my opinion, would not be best suited for auctioning. And that also kind of like crosses out consignments for that, because most consignment services with sealed product, like Sealed Shiz consignments, for example, I know there's some other ones like DA Card World or DC Sports, I think is actually what it's called. But it's like, an item that has a humongous difference between auction and buy it now, you might just want to take the time to list it and wait for it to sell rather than force liquidity at a 25% deficit, right? And so these are the types of things that you have to consider. However, if you're looking at something like an Evolving Skies booster box, they're likely auctioning and selling buy it now for a pretty similar price because it's so broadly in demand. And again, maybe Evolving Skies isn't the perfect example. That's not one that I've personally researched, but that's an example of an item with much greater demand relative to one that I just mentioned, being the Groundbreaker theme deck. Pretty niche. So these are all the types of considerations that you have to have. And again, tying back into my first video in this 3-part series, released yesterday, check it out. Your network is basically the way that's the determining factor between what you do and don't do with your items. For example, if you have an extremely small network and you don't really know many people, you don't trust the consignment services, you've never vetted them, you don't have a personal relationship with the people that I've been mentioning and others, then again, you might be inclined to just sell everything yourself. And while that's a fine strategy, many people have done that for a long time and been successful. And to some great extent, myself included, I'm proposing I'm underutilizing consignment services at this time. However, the greater your network is, the more access to opportunities like this that you may have. So getting the right items to the right people. And again, some of these considerations could just be to streamers. Again, raw cards, graded cards, sealed product, all of these types of things you're seeing sell on streams. So that opens up kind of like a whole other fourth outflow option that you might have for these types of items, other than just eBay, TCG Player, or consignment, which often happens through those same channels anyways. So knowing more people can actually expand your possibilities. And the cool thing is, if you're utilizing a consignment service, for example, and this isn't like the consignment pitch, it's just an option, and right now, in many cases, it's a good one, you're actually paying someone else to do the work for you. So instead of having to sit in your computer chair and do 10 listings a day or whatever on your eBay store, you can just package all the items in a box with a packing slip, mail it off, and someone else does all of that. And they interact with the customer service side of things for you, and they actually ship it to its end destination for you as well. And to some extent, they assume like the liability of if the package goes missing. And so there's all kinds of benefits that kind of roll along with consignment services in general. But the takeaway of today is there are more options for selling your items today than there ever has been. If you know a streamer in your city, or you just a streamer that you socialize with, that could be a valid option. If you've been growing an eBay store or a TCG Player store, that can be an option. And if you're well connected because you've done networking and socialized within the space, again, you've opened up access to many opportunities. And the more outflow channels you have, the better judgment you can apply to make sure that the items you are selling are reaching their highest potential. So, lesson of the day, know what you have. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.